Hey everyone, how's it going? Elliot here. I'm going to present to you for the next 15-20 minutes or so just on the plans coming up over the autumn block. And I want to introduce something to you that we call the what it takes to win mentality. And I'll give you a few stories from sport just to bring that to life a little bit. And the main bit today really is just to keep you guys in the loop, keep you excited for what's coming up next. We've got some plans between now and the end of the year, and I specifically want to focus on what's going to happen over the 6 weeks in autumn. Get you fully informed into what that's going to look like. Like I said, I also want to introduce this idea of what it takes to win, performance planning, and how that relates to our mentality as performers. And I think one of the big aims for next part of this is just really to motivate you to reflect, to find things to explore, and to plan moving forward. It's quite an exciting time, and yeah, hopefully we can bring that to life a little bit. So what's coming up? We've been working hard in the background really just to plan what's going to happen between now and the end of the year, wrapping up 2020 strong, and we've split that into two parts. So we've got a bit that's going to happen in between September and October, part one, and then November and December is part two. So the aim for that whole period is to try and achieve the things that you see on your screen now. So starting today, we'd like you guys to build an understanding of what it takes to win, both in terms of like the mentality and what it means for performance, but also what it might take to win in your particular skill and competition. We're going to use this remainder of the year to help you develop clear goals about what you want to achieve and recognize what it takes to achieve these goals. We're going to spend a bit of time, particularly in these first 6 weeks, to recognize your own relationship with performance and pressure, how those things work, what it's like to experience performing under pressure, and what that means for you as an individual competitor. Key thing is to help through tasks and questions and support, just to get you more aware of the strengths and challenges you might have from a mindset perspective, and particularly how they come alive in a performance environment, especially when you're under pressure. We're going to use the time to explore coping, and particularly what your natural coping strategies are and how you regulate emotions, and what those patterns are when you're under pressure, and what we can do as a performance wellbeing and a psych team to support you to make sure that thoughts, feelings really work for you when you're under pressure. And then finally, we're going to try through some tasks and some challenges to really put these emotional regulation strategies into practice, all with the idea of equipping you with what you need to be able to perform at your best when it matters under pressure. So hopefully that sounds exciting. So that's going to kind of be the flavour of what's going to happen until the end of the year. Just want to zone in really on that first part, the September and October stuff, just give you some dates, give you some ideas about what's going to happen, when and how. So this will all start obviously with this introduction from me. So we're recording this but this should be coming to you on the 14th of September. And then next week, we're going to be hitting some team building stuff, which will be done in small little cluster groups. So your coaches are going to lead on that. Keep an eye out for information being shared on what group you're in and when they're meeting. It's coming out on Guild during the first few weeks, so you'll get that relatively soon. Then we're going to go into a session with Steph, who's going to help us break down and better understand this pressure, stress, anxiety kind of performance relationship. It happens to everyone. I've not met an elite performer who doesn't experience stress, who doesn't experience anxiety. What separates them from those who aren't able to perform under pressure is that quite often they're not just better at handling the pressure, they're brilliant at turning it into a competitive advantage for them. One of my favorite quotes from a psychologist in the United States is that when you're under pressure, it's not about getting rid of the butterflies, it's about learning to help them fly in formation. And I think Steph will give us an opportunity to understand what that can mean for us, particularly when we're going into pressure environments. Then we're going to hit some challenges. So we're going to set you up with some scenarios, some tasks, and things to do in your own time. And then we'll report back and we'll keep a log of how people are getting on. And then we'll come back and then we'll have those discussions around what those challenge experiences were like for you, what it taught you about how you experience pressure and how you cope under pressure. And again, we'll do that in our small body groups. And then Greg's going to take us for week 6, which is going to look like just zoning in on now we've had that information, that education, we've gone and had some challenges and we've reflected upon it. What have we really taken and learned about how pressure and arousal influence not just our emotional state, but also how we're able to deliver skills and how that might impact our focus and our concentration. So I'm hoping that sounds exciting. There's loads of stuff for us to get our teeth into there, particularly the challenge stuff, which I'm quite excited about. So we'll keep you informed as we move through. But yeah, it's going to be a nice, quick-paced next 6 weeks. And hopefully by the end of that, you'll all have had an opportunity to explore some of those key ideas that we've been talking about. And I guess I always want to bring it back to my experience of this program so far is that it's all about young people having the opportunity to be the best they can be, absolutely. What I never want us to lose sight of is that we're all here for a shared purpose, which is to go onto the international stage and represent Team UK as best as we can, represent ourselves as best as we can, and to be competitive in every event that we find ourselves in and do our very best to try and be successful in those events. So everything has got that end performance goal. And what we're trying to do is teach you skills that are useful for performance, but also useful for life. But we can never lose sight of the fact that this is a performance endeavor. It's a performance program, and there's a ton that chasing performance can teach us about ourselves and about others. And I'm going to lean on a lot of work that I've experienced in my role working in elite Paralympic and Olympic sport in the English Institute of Sport, which is my day job. And I'm going to talk you through a process that we go through at the English Institute of Sport around performance planning and establishing what it takes to win. So the first part is always to dream big. And whenever I talk coaches or athletes or programs through this, it's always around ambition or aspiration. What is your big aspirational goal? What's the thing that's going to make you get up in the morning feeling really excited, really motivated to go and pursue? You know, what's the top of your Everest look like? How clear can we get on that, and how excited can we get about that? And it's not just about thinking it or keeping a quiet confidence in our own head. It's about kind of communicating that with other people. So the first stage is always about setting an aspirational goal. The next bit is then thinking deeply about, well, what will it take? If that's where I want to get to, what does it take to be that successful? I'll give you an example now. So let's say I'm in the world of athletics. And let's say that my aspirational goal, well, definitely not my aspirational goal because I'm not the, but if we take women's 100-meter sprint, okay? So if we're looking at, well, what will it take? If I want to be Olympic champion in the women's 100-meter sprint, what's it going to take? Well, what it's going to take is getting through, if I'm involved in the preliminary rounds, it's going to take 4 races over 2 days. Most of those races are going to come relatively late at night. And I'm going to need to navigate each of those rounds. So I have to be successful every time in order to get to the final before I am successful in the final. So on a real practical level, what it takes to win in the women's 100 meters at the Olympic Games is getting through 4 rounds of sprints. And if I look at what happened in Rio at the last Olympic Games in 2016, you can get a sense of what it took to win just by looking at the results. Now, what were the times people were achieving to get through these rounds? So if I'm trying to work out, well, what might it take to win, then from the preliminary rounds, the slowest qualifier was done in 12.34 seconds. So even just to get into the heats, I'm going to need to achieve that time. I can then have a look at the results of the semi-finals, of the heats. And I can see that out of everyone who qualified through the heats, the slowest time was 11.38. So even just to be in the mixed, even just to qualify to the semis, you've got to be hitting those times. To progress from the semi-finals, we're now looking at times under 11 seconds. So the slowest qualifier in the semi-finals was 10.96. The quickest was 10.88. Really, really small margins, but if you watch that over 100-meter sprint, that's kind of a clear and obvious gap. And now I can look at, well, what did it take to win on the day, on that final on the 13th of August at 10:30 at night in Rio? What did it take? Well, what it took for Elaine Thompson to be Olympic champion was to run 10.71. The slowest in that final was 11.8. So even just from like a really practical level, working out, well, what are the standards? What does it take to win? If that's my aspirational goal, what's it going to look like to get there? And that you can break this down into whichever components you like. So I've done quite a lot of work with canoe sprinting and quite a bit of work with swimming. And some of those guys will have ideas of what it takes to win. That won't just be the time, but it might be key parts of the race. So for canoe sprint, for example, they'll have some what it takes to win information on the speed at which you're able to reach peak acceleration or peak speed. They'll have some bits between the first meter and the 50th meter of a 500 race as a key. You've got to perform a certain amount of strokes or get there in a certain amount of time. Similarly, in swimming, they might pay particular attention to not just the overall time, but how quick your starts, turns, and finishes are. So there's loads of different ways in which you can break down that performance to get an idea of, well, what's it going to take to win. And the real fascinating thing about all of this is we're talking about 100 meters race that happened 4 years ago. That doesn't necessarily mean that's what it's going to take to win at the next Olympic Games. In fact, it will probably take a quicker time to win at the next Games. So we're always just trying to gain insight into how we can get really clear on what that final performance is going to look like. And in your world, this will relate to the standards. What kind of skills, what kind of processes, what kind of strategies are you going to have to deploy in the moment to be successful at World Skills? And then beyond the final performance itself, you might look at the components that make up the performance. So this is GB Judo's What It Takes to Win model. They've gone pretty loose on the top end. So they talk about what it takes to win is the technical, tactical, mental ability with the performance profile to physically dominate and outfight your opponent to execute the best performance on the day and win up to 5 contests when it counts. So that's what it takes in judo. But what they've done is break that down into some sections. So you've got your technical and strategic trademarks that are related to judo performance. You've got the performance profile of where that judoka has been historically, what they've been able to achieve, what standards they are going into the competition. Then you've got a number of physical benchmarks. Then you've got a number of nutrition and body composition factors. And then there's a whole load of psychological components as well. And they break that down into processes that are built on Randori, which is a training method, and then the individual athlete plan. So really interesting just to get some ideas from different sports and different performance environments about how they go about this stuff. I wonder what it takes to win model would look like in your particular skill. So we've got our aspirational goal. We know what the top of our mountain looks like. We've started to break down what we think it's going to take to achieve that outcome. But now we need to think about, well, where am I now? Where am I now, and what's the gap between where I am now and where I want to be? Now that could be simply looking at, well, I've got to run sub 11 or sub 10.8 to to achieve a medal in the final. At the moment, I'm running 12.1, so that's the gap. Or it might be taking a more of a judo approach, which might be I'm doing pretty well on a lot of these factors, but actually my physical, my psychological, my body composition benchmarks are quite a way off where they need to be. So that's my gap. So this part of the performance planning process is all about working out what's the distance between where you are now and where you want to be. Sometimes that can be quite a tricky conversation, particularly if you believe you were already good. Some people, and I've come across this quite a few times, have a real strong belief that they are what is required to be successful. But then when you show them world-leading standards and they get a real understanding of how far off they are, that can be quite difficult for some people to take. But the best performers I've worked with are the ones that say, right, okay, if that's a gap, let's go get it. What do I need to do to make that gap smaller? How can I get closer? How can I surpass that standard? And then that's the question, I guess, that comes next is, if this is the standard and this is where I am now, what's it going to look like to close that? What's it going to look like in the future when what I have done becomes the standard for others to look at? And how do we kind of look at a way in which we can start to track a route up the mountain? We start to work out what it is that we need to do, the areas that we need to prove, the strengths that we already have that we need to bring to the fore to help us develop and succeed. This is where performance planning really comes together well. And I've taken this from GB Archery, and you can see that on one side of the screen in the blue, they've got their what it takes to win model, which, as we talked about, is what needs to get delivered on the day. But then sitting before that are a range of things that an athlete or an archer can look at and say, well, these are the things that I need to be working on if I want to get to a place where I can deliver my best under pressure on the day. So there's a whole load of things in red here that are around archery specific skills, which they call shooting line performance, related to archery capability, competition experience, stuff that's non-archery specific, so like physical strength, psychological approaches and attitudes, your equipment, and then a whole host of mental capabilities. And then sitting even beyond that in the orange is how do we reorganize things like how we practice, how we organize our lifestyle, how we maintain our health and well-being as things that are critical factors to help bridge the gap between world leading standard or the standard of the aspirational goal and where that person is at this time. And then my favorite bit really is often the bit that's really easy to skip over, but having an idea of where you want to get to, where you are now, and what the gap looks like and how you bridge that gap isn't the whole story. Because if we know anything about human behavior, anything about change, anything about chasing stuff that's difficult, is that our brains will fight tooth and nail to take the easy option. So we have to work out, what is this going to look like in practice? Practically, day to day, hour by hour, what is it I'm going to be doing? What do I need to commit to? How do I need to organize things to make sure I give myself the best opportunity to succeed? So how will I balance work? How will I balance college? How will I balance social life, family life, all the rest of it? Where does that all fit in? It's not just a case of saying, I want to be the fastest woman in the world. I need to hit these standards. I'm 2 seconds off that, so I just need to get quicker. Because that doesn't translate into practice. The other bit is, who do you need support from? What do you need to tell other people to make sure that they're best positioned to help you? So for you, this will be your coaches, it'll be performance wellbeing team, it might be your lecturers at college, it might be parents, friends. And then on a day-to-day, like, how do you know you're doing the right stuff? How do you know you're getting any better? So how will you assess your progress? So all of this coming into what it looks like day to day, what you're going to have to deliver on if you are going to bridge that gap. So that's like a whistle-stop tour through a performance planning process, which is something that's used across most Olympic and Paralympic sports. I've seen it in another performance domains. I think anyone who is serious about improving their capability, achieving ambitious performance targets, all use a version of this. I don't think any of it particularly is rocket science. But one of the things that we know about what it takes to win is often quite simple, but it's definitely not easy. So things I just want to throw over to you guys, because I said a part of this was about motivating you, exciting you, getting you interested in reflecting and exploring and considering how you can get better. So I want to throw these questions at you, and they're not designed to put you on the back foot or to make you feel bad about yourself. They're to get you thinking and to get you excited. My first question is, how do you know you're any good? Particularly on like compared to world standard, how clear are you on what world leading standards are and how well you measure up to that? And also a little thought experiment that might be helpful would be to think about, all right, let's say you're representing Team UK, world skills, you've gone through the final, you've been successful, you're standing on the podium. It's all gone brilliantly. What type of performance would you have had to deliver to make that happen? How would you describe it? What would you have done? What would it have looked like? What would it have felt like? And also, what would it have taken from you to get from where you are now to get to that level of performance? I hope these are exciting questions for you. I'm definitely excited to help you explore some of these. And if anyone wants to give me a shout and talk any of this through, I'm more than happy. But this is the type of mindset, type of thinking that we'd love you to get into, because it really captures the spirit of performance planning, what it takes to win, and the opportunities for growth, what you can learn about yourself, what you can learn about challenge, what you can learn about being the best version of yourselves are just brilliant. There's nothing quite like a performance pursuit to really give you great life lessons. So we're excited for what you can learn and develop into from a performance perspective, but also what this means for you as a person and an individual. So that's it for me. Thank you very much for your time. And yeah, I look forward to seeing you over the next few weeks. Cheers.